Welcome back, treasures. Today I have a haunted skeleton mirror dupe for you. I found this skeleton mirror on Pinterest, and I will attach the T-diddly D blog where I found that below if you want to check out the original posting. I had this mirror that was a vanity mirror that had a little bit of bad spots in it from a previous renter, and it did this weird thing when I tried to paint it when I was redoing that particular bathroom. So I'm just going to take out the mirror portion and spray paint this whole thing black to use it in my skeleton mirror here. So I'm just using a regular spray paint, and I did sand this whole thing down just lightly so the spray paint would adhere better because it has that very, very slick plastic type finish on it. And I used quick little bursts on the spray paint so that it wouldn't run on here. And I ended up having to do 2 coats, but it turned out pretty well. I have all of these skulls that I want to use, and they're all slightly different colors, and they look very cheap and fake. So for these little tiny bones, I'm going to go ahead and cut it to where it looks a little bit more natural. And I do this with just some clippers out of my jewelry toolkit. And I cut off the bottom where there's just a little bit of knob there from the mold. And then I'm going to cut a divot right in the top here where this bone would actually fit into a socket or kind of connecting to that other bone there. And I'm just going to cut to both sides a little divot in here so that it looks more natural in the middle where those 2 pieces would meet. After I get all of them cut up, then I just took them outside to give them a quick little sanding with some sandpaper to make that cut a little bit smoother. And then also you'll see there's this line down all of them. So I just used the sandpaper to try to scuff up that line a little bit and smooth it out. And then I used sandpaper and scuffed up all of the rest of it so that the paint would adhere very well. And I'm just going to use a quick coat of spray paint on this, and it is not white, but it's very close. It's a very, very light off-white, kind of an eggshell, or a bone color, you might say. And now that all my bones are the same color, I'm going to do a sponging technique to kind of give them a little bit of a red rusty effect in the background. And so I'm taking this natural sponge, you can find them at any craft stores, and I wet it down and wrung it out so it's just slightly damp. And then I'm using a watered down version of a brown mixed with red. And then I'm just sponging it lightly onto all of the bones. And then I am taking a paper towel and dabbing that straight back down while it's still wet. And if you remove too much, the great thing is you can sponge some more back on, but you cannot take off after it's been dried. So if you see that you put too much on, make sure and blot it excessively with your paper towel. Now I'm going to take the bones and I'm kind of going to make that dirty effect in the areas that are the little nooks and crannies and divots of the bones, because this is the area that dirt and grime and little bits of flesh and meat would have stuck to the bone. It's harder for the animals, the critters, the insects to eat it off, and the weather and elements to strip that part clean. So these are the parts that are going to look a little dirtier on your natural bone. So I'm just going to go back and do a dry brush technique with a very dark brown. It's not black, it's a dark brown that I just put a hint of black into. And then I'm doing that again over all of the areas that are kind of sunken in on the bones, or in this case of this arm piece, any spot where bone meets bone, you will also want to put kind of that darker brown color, because where the bone meets the bone, that's going to be a little harder to have gotten clean over the years and decomposing period. So I'm going to get into all of these nooks and crannies and then just blot off with my paper towel any excess that is there. If you're new here and you're enjoying this video today and you like creepy crafting or witchy content, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button below and becoming part of our community. So I'm just adding this darker brown color to all of the fingers here, and I'm going to put it between the fingers where they would meet each other if they were touching each other, because I imagine that to be a harder area for the elements to have cleaned up and made whiter as well. Now for the skulls, I also went in and made sure to paint the darker cracks of where the skulls were and make sure that they were this darker color, because again, that is an area that is divoted kind of in. I did get too much brown on the teeth of the skulls, and so I wanted to highlight those and whiten them up a little bit. So I'm dry brushing a solid white back over the teeth. And you'll see it just brightens them just a tiny bit. Now that my frame is completely dry, I'm just going to put the mirror back into it. Now, I left the mirror as is, but you could definitely paint the mirror black as well, scuff it up with a little bit of sandpaper, and turn it into a scrying mirror. But I liked the idea of having the mirror as it is. So first I laid out my bones where I thought I wanted them to be and let them set for an hour or two, and came back and looked at them over and over to make sure that I wanted them in those spots. After I was sure and committed to this is where the bones are going to go, then I came back with this glue and adhered them to the frame. Now this particular glue is a glue that's kind of like a cross between super glue and E6000. So it holds up very well like E6000 does, but it sets up a lot quicker, more like super glue. Not quite, it still takes a couple of minutes to set up, but not the hours of having to potentially hold an item in an exact awkward spot that you would with E6000. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't get a bunch of excess glue everywhere. So I got down to eye level of where the skull was going to meet the mirror and made sure that I knew exactly where it was touching so I could put glue only in the spots that it would actually be touching. I don't want a lot of glue over mess on my mirror. So then I just repeated the process over and over for each tiny bone, trying to keep them in place of where they were so that I knew exactly where to glue them up. And after I got them all glued, I let it set to dry for a full 24 hours before I hung it on the wall. And I just love how this turned out. I put my little pool noodle candles on it that I made last year. And if you like this too, make sure and give this video a thumbs up. Until next time, treasures, keep crafting.